Number 40, Narcos Season 4. I think Narcos has had its day. I'm calling it Narcos Season 4, even though it's technically Narcos Mexico Season 1. And that doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter anymore. It's another season of Narcos. It does the same thing that the other Narcos seasons have done. But it doesn't have Pablo Escobar still. I had Pablo Escobar for one episode, and it was nice to see him again, but the show has not picked up since Pablo went after season 2. He was just dynamite. He was such a compelling antagonist. You sort of got pulled into his world, and you got pulled into his ideas and how he thought and how he operated, and it was good TV. It was good to watch. And it's never really captured that in any of the bad guys or any of the other cartels that it's explored since. It's never really found another Pablo. And that's a shame. It is a shame, because when Narcos is good, it's really good, but I think by the time we've got to season 4, it's pretty obvious that the heyday is long behind the show, and we're just sort of chugging along and doing the same thing we've been doing for a long time, just worse. Number 39 is She-Ra Princesses of Power Season 1. Yes, I watched it. It's a little girl show, but I watched it. I don't feel good for watching it, but it was on the list of things that was just available on Netflix. It was there to watch, and I'd heard, based on stuff like the discussions I'd had with people about the Dragon Prince, that She-Ra was of the same vein. It was as good. People were saying it was better. Some people were saying it, and I thought, you know what, I'll watch it. It's been on there for a while, and I've put it off, and it is the most recent show on the list. I finished it yesterday, and I had to sneak it on there, so I've probably got a bit more to say about it than some of the other shows in this category. It took me by surprise. The first 6 or 7 episodes, I didn't really see much potential in it. I didn't really see what was gripping people. One thing that I really think the show actually does very well, and there's a lot that I don't think the show does particularly well, but the one thing it does very well, after this first season at least, is the relationship between Adora and Catra. It's well done. It's well put together. They have a good antagonistic relationship with each other. You sort of, when they're on screen together, there's a good little character chemistry. And I don't know where it's going, but it's where the show works the best. And the first half of the season, you don't really get that much of it. I think there's one episode where there's some of it, but the second half of the season, where there's more of an arc to the episode, there's more of a linking, rather than we're going to go here and do this adventure, then we're going to go there and we're going to save that person, episode to episode. There's more of a link between the second half of the season that works a lot better. I'm really undecided on whether I actually like the look of the animation. It's flat. I like some of the character designs. I really don't like some of the other ones. There doesn't seem to be any sort of restriction on the colours. Everything is just, super rich colours, super saturated, and it gets a bit garish at times. And then there's other times where I think, this is a pretty nice looking show. I like the expressions on the characters. Some of the action's cool. So it's not by any means perfect season. It's not even a very good season, but it's decent. It's better than I thought it was going to be, especially based off those first few episodes. Number 38, Game of Thrones Season 6. A lot of people rank Season 6 very highly among Game of Thrones seasons. I do not particularly, even though it's got some great moments. Obviously the Battle of the Bastards being a big standout moment, as well as Cersei destroying the Sept of Baelor. There's some good shit going on in Season 6, but also how the Battle of the Bastards is resolved with Sansa coming out of nowhere with an army, even though she could have just told Jon about the army, but she didn't, for dramatic purposes, and therefore lots of people got killed unnecessarily, which doesn't really look good on anyone. This is also the season where Arya gets stabbed. 100 times and then thrown into a dirty medieval river where she should get like dysentery and cholera and every disease known to man, and then she's doing parkour the next episode. And I think Daenerys does something where she just walks into a hut and sets it on fire, and then she's got her third Dothraki horde of the show, and it's just like, the conveniences just keep happening and the logic is being stretched at this point. It's sort of undermined. There's a lot of, like I say, there's a lot of really good moments, but so many of them are undermined by cheap writing, cheap narrative tricks that undermine really what Game of Thrones was built on and why people cared about it in the first place. So a lot of people say that this season was better than season 5 of Game of Thrones, and I can see why. I can see why people liked it more, because it's sort of going full Hollywood, and it is effective when it does that, when it has the big marquee moments of the show where it plays its hand and it pulls off something visually and emotionally effective. But I think the foundation of those moments in season 6 is so weak that it undermines a lot of it. And that is part of what becomes the downfall of the show, and I think calling those out early when they're not as contentious as they become, for that reason I would rank it this lowly in the Game of Thrones, and also this list. It's 2 lists. Number 37 is Line of Duty Season 2, which is the second best Line of Duty. It is a cop show about cops. The cops have to stop the bad cop. I think on this one there is a little bit more emotional attachment to the characters. You understand a little bit more about who they are, what makes them tick, what they're going through. It's not a ton, but it doesn't really set a foot wrong. I think it doesn't set a foot wrong almost because Line of Duty doesn't set a foot wrong almost because it doesn't try to do that much. It's trying to play so safely at times that it isn't taking any risks, so it's neither good nor terrible. That's why things like Game of Thrones are like quite high up on this list and quite low on this list, and why Line of Duty is clustered around this middle, because it never seems that ambitious of a show, but it also means that it never fails spectacularly. 36 is Peaky Blinders Season 1. It's a solid enough start. It's not as good as the show gets, but it's also a fine introduction to this world. It looks really good. You can tell that the show has made a commitment to keeping a very specific aesthetic that evokes this early 1900s visual. I've no idea what the budget is for Peaky Blinders, but it looks good. It's like I say, it's a good introduction to the world. It's a good introduction to the characters. It's not as interesting as it gets later on, but it is a good solid foundation to what becomes a pretty good show. Number 35 is Line of Duty Season 3. This is the last. I didn't see the 5th season of Line of Duty, so this is the last Line of Duty on the list. It's better. There is a plot that has been building up until this moment that is revealed. It's been building up over the last couple of seasons, and it is revealed and it is dealt with, and that is probably the most satisfying moment in the show's entire run. And for that reason alone, the fact that it actually took the time to build a character up and build a plot that tested some of the main characters and tested some allegiances and made things a little bit more engaging. That's all it takes to be the best season of Line of Duty. Number 34, I Think You Should Leave Season 1. I Think You Should Leave is a sketch comedy series from Tim Robinson. It is quite hit and miss, but when it hits, it is pretty fucking funny. There's not that much to go into in terms of characters and storylines and what the setting is, and being a sketch comedy, it doesn't really fit those factors, so it was hard to place on the list. But it was good. It was good. It wasn't always hilarious because some of the skits just don't work and they go on a little bit too long. But that's always going to be the case. I think it's good groundwork. It's a case of he's got to figure out which of the jokes work and which of the characters and the recurring skits work and which ones don't. But I think it's promising for season 2 if you can get that sort of stuff figured out. 33 is Game of Thrones Season 5. I'm not going to bang on that much about it, but this is definitely where the first cracks start to appear. I think this is the one where the storylines involve Dawn and also Arya going to the House of Black and White. Neither of those plots work at all. They are among the most boring and the most stupid of the sort of like long-term plots that happen within Game of Thrones. Dawn is unceremoniously dropped from the show as soon as possible because the fans hated it that much. But the House of Black and White is just as boring. And I think the one good thing about season 5 is this the one where Bran doesn't appear at all? Fine with that. Could have just like that was the one thing that they really had going in this season. They should have just kept that running for the rest of the show. But yeah, I don't bang her out Game of Thrones that much. Putting every season on this list, I mean, it's boring me, so it must be boring you. Number 32, The Dragon Prince Season 2, which was a marked improvement on the first season of the show. The animation was a lot smoother, the story was just a lot more engaging. The characters, we saw like a bit of the history of the world, we saw what made the world, you know, the way it is and how it was affecting the backstory of the characters and their motivations. We finally, you know, got something to grab a hold of on the characters, which was lacking severely in the first season. We get to see what's going on in the characters' minds, we get to see them challenged a little bit more. I know a lot of people were put off by season 1. I definitely think that the show overall would have benefited more if some of the backstory and some of the ideas that were brewing in season 2 had been brought forward a little bit into season 1. It would have given the show a lot of stronger footing to get off on. Number 31 and number 30, Aggretsuko, season 1 and season 2. I banged the whole show out watching in over the space of I think slightly under a week, so the line between what's season 1 and what's season 2, I don't really comprehend what the difference is. This is an anime office comedy where animals work in an office and it's about a red panda or a raccoon or something called Retsuko, who is a very meek and mild office worker by day, but at night she is a death metal karaoke singer. It's sort of a weird, mundane slice of life comedy thing all at the same time. It's charming, it's fine, it doesn't push too many boundaries in terms of what the show is actually about, but it's perfectly serviceable. It's funny. Not all of the humour translates, I don't think, particularly well into English. I think there are a lot of gags, a lot of jokes that are just repeated almost verbatim between some of the episodes. The characters are all like larger than life, and they're, you know, it's funny. I'd recommend it. It's worth watching. Number 29, Dragon Pilot, Hisone and Masotan, season 1. I've only just realised now that I've put this next to Aggretsuko, and that wasn't planned, but it might be quite fitting because there is similarities between these two shows. They're both anime, they're both very slice of life, and they both have a strange setting that they are making mundane. I mean, Aggretsuko isn't that wild in the sense that anthropomorphic animals in a comedy setting isn't particularly new. I mean, obviously, like BoJack Horseman's doing it. There's been plenty of other shows that have done it in the past. Dragon Pilot certainly does seem very unique in its setting, at least from what I've seen. Basic setup is that it is a slice of life sort of anime where there isn't much of an emphasis on a particular plot or action or adventure or anything like that. It's a slice of life. It's about these characters having very mundane problems, having very relatable issues that people have gone through every day, and how they cope with those issues, and how they overcome the problems and difficulties that are facing, whether it's finding love or making friends or any sort of, you know, fitting in a new environment, stuff like that. Dragon Pilot has all of those, with the backdrop that the main character is a young woman who has enrolled in the Japanese Air Force, which is a bizarre sort of concept anyway for something as mundane as this. But not just that, the plane that she's flying in the Air Force isn't actually a plane, it is a dragon that is disguised as a plane. Now, if I opened the show talking about that is a anime about a young woman who flies a dragon that is disguised as a fighter jet, you might think those wacky Japanese, look at them with their crazy action-packed settings of zany adventure and crazy antics that these characters will get up to. It's nothing like that at all. It's played completely straight, but it is as mundane a show as you're likely to watch, and it is really bizarrely charming because of that, because it just plays this outlandish setting with complete straightness and doesn't really do anything too exciting with it, but it just sort of chugs along and it just sort of does its own thing. I think it was co-produced by Netflix, but I don't think you would get a show quite like that in the West, and for that reason alone it's interesting enough to be this high on the list. Number 28, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, season 13 now. It's really one of the most consistent shows that has ever been made. You know, it's maybe not quite as high as it was once in the day. It's dropped off a little bit, but it's still a damn funny show. And there is another season out that I haven't watched yet, but I'm looking forward to it. If you haven't watched any of Always Sunny in Philadelphia, get watching it. You know, the first season is funny enough, but once you get the character of Frank, once you get the character, the Danny DeVito character, it just takes off. One of the best comedies that has ever been made. Number 27, The Dragon Prince, season 3. So this is the latest season of the show that came out 2019. It is certainly the best. The show just keeps going up and up, which is great to see because it had sort of a rocky start, at least in my opinion. It's good to see that it has completely, you know, shaken that off. It feels like the show has really arrived in this third season. Like, this is a culmination of everything that the show has been building to. I know they've got more stories planned in future seasons, but this really feels like everything has been building up to this moment. The proof of concept has been delivered on, I suppose, in this third season. It feels like the big grand story, fantasy story that it was intending to tell from the beginning has finally arrived. It ramps up the characters, it ramps up the sort of like the backstory and the history of the world, building on stuff that's already established from the second season. It's just giving you more of that. And the action's getting really good in the third season. There's a lot of big, like, you know, grand battle scenes and fights with magical creatures and weird settings when they finally, because this is the season where they finally get to the sort of like Zadia, which is like the magical kingdoms. So there's a lot more to show off from like a creative world building standpoint, which is appreciated because I think the world building isn't necessarily Dragon Prince's strongest suit. So any chance they get to be a bit more creative is it does the show a lot of good. I think after this latest season I am now properly actually invested in the story and the characters and where they're going to go. I definitely wasn't after the first one. Could have gone either way after the second, but the third one has sealed the deal for me, and I'm looking forward to what they've got in store next. Number 26 at number 25, Peaky Blinders season 5 and season 4. I'd put season 4 probably slightly on the higher one, but I don't think there's that much between these two seasons. They're both good. Season 4 is what's he called? The gangster, Brody Quest. Adrian Brody is an American mobster who comes to Birmingham to challenge the Peaky Blinders for dominance based on, you know, a family connection. So that brings like the mafia in. Season 5 is about Oswald Mosley and his sort of rise, bringing fascism to the UK. His attempted, you know, fascist takeover inspired by Mussolini. They are interesting ideas that are brought to the table in these seasons, but also the characters are handled really well. You see more of what makes them tick and how that sets certain main characters against each other. One of the concerns I suppose I had going into season 5 was that things just happened too easily to Tommy Shelby, the main character. He was getting a little bit Mary Sue-ish. He was getting a bit like too clever for the show. He was getting a bit things were too easy for him. So season 5 manages to take him down a bit of a peg. It's not entirely convincing, but you know, the show picked up that the main character wasn't being challenged enough, so they've put him in an environment that does challenge him, which is good to see. As you know, two good seasons of TV. Impressed. Yeah, I'm impressed. Number 24, what is it called? Number 24, One Planet, Seven Worlds. It's a terrible name, but this is this year's big BBC Richard Attenborough, David Attenborough, one of the Attenboroughs. Which one's still alive? David Attenborough, yeah. big David Attenborough documentary. It's got all the sort of usual things. This one's based around the 7 continents. It's all the same sort of stuff that you used to, but it's obviously, you know, it's every year it comes out, it sort of blows you away. It's like the one sort of documentary that you're like properly looking forward to year after year. There's some highlights for me. There was a really cool like scene with like wolves in Italy, which I didn't expect. Amazing. You really wonder like how they film some of it. They only have that little featurette afterwards where they explain some of the work, but some of the shots they get are absolutely mind blowing. I mean, anything to do with like whales hunting in like the deep sea, you get the real sense that nobody has seen this sort of stuff before. This has just been going on for millions of years, and it's only just now that we're able to actually see these things happening. So yeah, it's a joy to watch. I do think old Dave is getting a bit more bloodthirsty in his old age. He's obviously like hammering the environmental message a lot now, and that's fine. You know, he's more than in his right to do that. But I think like the first scene in the first episode was like,
an Arctic seal. Few creatures are adapted to such a harsh environment, but this young mother is one of them. But there is a problem. Her young pup is dying. This one is due to climate change. This one's on you. It's your fault.
You know what? He is more than welcome to make that message. It just seems like old Dave is not like fucking around in his old age. He's going in hard. He's going in without lube, and he's got to get used to it because he's not going to turn back now, is he? Number 23 is Hilda, which is another Netflix animated kids show that I watched. I needed something easy to watch, something that wasn't going to challenge me during the last 2 episodes of Game of Thrones, so I just slapped this on, and it was really nice. It was really charming. I didn't know a whole lot about it. It's like just a bunch of kids that live in a sort of like mythical world that's very similar to our own. There's just like, you know, there's some creatures that live out. I've used charming a lot, but it is very charming. I suppose we're out of the ambivalence zone and now we're into the charming zone, because there's a lot of these shows in this portion of the list that I've described as charming, and Hilda is definitely chock full of charm. Number 22, Tigtone Season 1. I loved the original animation cartoon, web cartoon of the begun of Tigtone. It had a really weird, sort of off-putting, quite ugly animation style, but the humour really suited it. We saw this, you know, it doesn't sell it particularly well, but it was like a parody of a Dungeons and Dragons quest, but it was just sort of the way the wordplay and the extremeness, the excessiveness of the character really carried it along, and I was looking forward to this season, this new series of I think it was on Adult Swim, for a long time. I can't say that it disappointed. It was funny. It was, some of the episodes definitely worked better than others. I was a bit iffy on the sidekick character. What was his name? Helpy, the assistant character Helpy. Yeah, I was a bit iffy on Helpy for a bit, but he grew on me, she grew on me, whatever it is, it grew on me. And overall, just a very funny season of television. I don't think it ever quite hit the strand, you know, the sort of like the highs of the original webtoon, but overall, you know, throughout the season it was quite consistently funny, and I really enjoyed it. And the webtoon's still great because you can watch that now, and then if you enjoyed it as a taster, as a teaser, you can go on and watch the rest of the series and support the show. Number 21, Les Miserables, Les Mis, not the musical, not the movie. This was the BBC production based solely off the book. I've seen the musical. I like the musical a lot. I've seen it both on stage and the film version and the 10th anniversary concert that's available on YouTube. Go watch it. It's a great introduction to the whole Les Mis thing. This series was very different because it was adapted directly from the Victor Hugo novel. It had Dominic West, it had David Oyelowo, it had Olivia Colman and Lily Collins in it as well. It was really good. It was I don't if you've seen War and Peace, which the BBC did a few years ago, which was brilliant. It's not quite as good as that, but it's in that sort of similar sort of classic story, costume drama vein. And as someone who had seen the musical first, this gave more of a background, more insight into Jean Valjean as a character. You know, the transition he makes from criminal to prisoner to, you know, mayor and father and hero and all that sort of stuff that he comes later in the story. I think the musical makes more of him being sort of imprisoned falsely, well, not falsely, but sort of like imprisoned like harshly for what was a minor crime becoming this long sentence. And in the musical he's always sort of characterised as a victim. I know there is that bit about, you know, stealing from the priest, but there's always a sense of victimhood with Jean Valjean as a character, whereas in this BBC production you see him more with the mindset of someone who thinks that society doesn't value him, thinks that he's been given up on, so he's going to give up on everything else. So the transition from that mindset to the mindset he has at the end of the story, it's a lot bigger, it's a lot more compelling to watch. Not that it's necessarily better than the musical, because it's a completely different thing, but it makes more of a point of this is where he started off and this is where he finished. And other than that, it's just a good story. Like musical, novel, whatever adaptation you watch, it's still a good story. That's why it's worked so well. And this BBC adaptation is no exception, really. Number 20, Young Justice, Season 1. I've gone over a bit of the disappointment that I have with Young Justice since the revival, but Young Justice pre-revival was a really good show. Like I've already said, you know, it just captures a really good team dynamic. Season 1 is really good. I think Season 1 is actually most people's favourite. I prefer the second one, so I'll talk a bit about that like further up the list. The appeal of Season 1 is that it's the team dynamic. It just feels like a proper young hero teen adventure thing. It just does it really well. All the characters work together in interesting ways. They all bounce off each other. They all have strong personalities. They all have relationships with their mentors that informs sort of where they're coming from, both mentally and in terms of their backstory. I think Season 1's biggest appeal is really the team dynamic is at its strongest. It's like the core team, the most interesting characters, all there in the first season. So that's, you know, I mean, it's one of the reasons, it's probably the main reason people flocked to the show and why there was a big call to bring it back once it was cancelled. And, you know, very few of those are successful, so it just goes to the testament of the show, how it was when it first aired, the sort of impact it had on its fan base. Number 19, Genndy Tartakovsky's Primal. There's not much said in this show, but there is quite a lot to say about it. I think this is Tartakovsky's first proper production since the last season of Samurai Jack that aired either last year or the year before. Mixed opinions on that, but Samurai Jack as a whole was a good show. This seems very much in the same vein, very much an episodic, genre-driven, genre-specific short run of episodes. I think it was just the 5 episodes, and it's about a prehistoric man living in a dinosaur world. There's a tragedy that happens to him and he decides to take it out on a dinosaur, and then a similar tragedy befalls that dinosaur, and they end up forming this strange bond, almost like partners, almost. It's a bond that just exists and you sort of feel it, but it goes very undefined, as does a lot in the show, because it is silent. There is no dialogue in any of the episodes. There's just sort of like visceral grunting, which makes it certainly different. There's something sort of inherent and universal about the show. It's a very simple story that it's trying to tell. The fact that there isn't any dialogue doesn't make it specific to anywhere really. It's an American show, but it could have been made anywhere. The prehistoric nature of it makes it feel very primal. It feels like a story that anyone can really engage with. It's very loose, very undefined in terms of who it's appealing to, but it is quite violent in places, so that might take people by surprise, or watching it expecting something like Samurai Jack, which had action but always went to lengths not to be quite visceral. Primal does away with all that. It just it really goes for it when it goes for it, but it's good. It feels earned. Every bit of action, every bit of violence feels earned through the setting and the story that is being told. Number 18, What We Do in the Shadows, Season 1. This one actually took me a little bit by surprise. I'd seen the movie a couple of years ago, so this was like a spin-off from that, but with a whole different set of actors, a whole different set of characters. And it was surprisingly very funny. And I ended up hearing about it from like all sorts of people that I knew that I didn't expect would be into the show or even know about it or know about the movies or whatever. It kept getting recommended to me, and you know, after I'd already started watching it, strangely enough. So some of the later episodes were a bit more sketchy. I think they like front loaded the series with all the best material. You know, it was charming enough. It had a fun set of characters to work with. All the personalities bounced off each other really well. It's a weird enough setting for it to work and have some room to develop. And you know, the people behind it, you know, the Jermaine Clement and all those guys behind it, you've got to trust them by now that they know what they're doing with that style of comedy. So yeah, I look forward to the second one. Number 17, Better Call Saul, season 4. This was the best one. It's a very slow show, and it has put a lot of people off who were coming from it off the back of Breaking Bad, which was so high intensity, so high impact a show that they want to see more of Saul Goodman, who was one of the more eccentric and light-hearted characters on the show, and then they come into Better Call Saul and it's a slow show. It's sort of depressing in parts. It's much it's lower octane than Breaking Bad, which makes sense because Breaking Bad was the most crazy thing that ever happened in Saul Goodman's life. So any prequel to that, any build up to what happened before Breaking Bad and focusing on Saul Goodman is going to be less dramatic. But that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be any less good. I don't think that the Better Call Saul has ever really hit the peaks of Breaking Bad, but season 4 is probably the closest it's come. The whole fallout from Chuck's death is really well handled. It pushes Jimmy on, makes him strangely more of an interesting character. I thought the relationship between him and Chuck was good anyway, but the fallout from his death makes you sort of see the, you know, parts of it that make Saul what Saul was in Breaking Bad. So yeah, really impressed. If you were going to watch Better Call Saul, you would have done it already by now, I feel. But yeah, this for me, this was the best season of the show. Number 16, Peaky Blinders season 2, which I felt was the best of. Well, it's quite a good bunch. I enjoyed the show, like from start to beginning. It's got its issues with some of the characters. Not all of the storylines are great, but overall, you know, it's well worth watching as a show. I think as a story that's been building up as like a culmination to the first 2 seasons is I think this is really the best work the show does. Seasons 3, 4 and 5 are good, but they go a bit excessive, they go a bit Hollywood. I think the first 2 seasons are more grounded, and the payoff at the end of the second season is really what makes it the best as far as I'm concerned. I don't think that this sort of peak is beyond the show. There was quite a big drop off into the 3rd season as far as I'm concerned, but it's building its way back up, and if that continues, then you know, the show's got a bright future ahead of it.